Welcome to Exam Talks. I'm Michael Ortega. Today we're digging into something almost everyone in Florida's construction market knows about, but few talk about openly, the qualifier market. You've seen the license number on a permit, you've shrugged, but what does that actually mean? Why does a whole marketplace exist around qualified individuals, and how do new intermediary platforms, places like Florida Contractor Qualifier and Contractor Qualifier Connect, fit into this picture? Joining me is Danielle Reese. Danielle, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Michael. Glad to be here.
Danielle, quick plug of your background for listeners. You ran commercial projects, now you place qualifiers and run operations at a placement firm. Tell us in plain English, what is a qualifier in Florida, and what's the legal responsibility tied to that person?
Sure. A qualifier, often called a qualifying agent, is the licensed individual whose name ties a contractor license to a business. Under Chapter 489, that person is supposed to supervise construction operations, ensure code compliance, sign permits, and ultimately be accountable to DVPR if something goes wrong. Legally, the license isn't just a formality, it's personal responsibility. Practically, though, that's where things get messy.
Messy. Yeah, so let's pull the thread. Why did a shadow market for rent-to-license arrangements emerge in Florida?
A few structural reasons. One, the licensing bar is high. Years of verifiable experience, passing exams, financial responsibility proof. Two, Florida's construction demand spikes. Hurricanes, population growth, so firms need to move fast. Three, many skilled crews or out-of-state contractors simply don't want to spend months getting licensed to chase a single job. Put those together, and there's real demand for speed to market, which creates the market for paid qualifier arrangements.
And enforcement? I mean, if the statute is clear, why doesn't DBPR stamp these out?
Bureaucracy and priorities. DBPR handles dozens of professions. Enforcement is largely complaint-driven. They focus on clear, unlicensed contracting and consumer harm. If an application shows a licensed qualifier on paper, building departments will usually accept that, then move on. It's very hard to audit whether that qualifier actually visits sites or controls operations unless someone files a complaint.
So that opacity 1 license number on a permit enables a lot. Now, walk me through the common under-the-radar deal types. What do these arrangements actually look like on the ground?
There are a few common models. One is a flat monthly retainer. A license holder appears on DBPR records and signs permits and gets, say, $1,000 to $3,000 a month. They rarely show up on site. Two is per permit or per project fees, useful for trades with short jobs, like roofing. Three, multiple company sponsorship. One qualifier sponsoring lots of firms in different counties, which becomes practically impossible to supervise. Four, shell companies. Paper companies where the qualifier is an officer, but the real crews operate separately. Each has different risk profiles, but they all have in common that real supervision is often limited.
Let me interrupt. Danielle, give me a concrete, anonymized story that illustrates the downside. Something listeners can feel.
Sure, picture a small roofer, great skill set, 15 years in the field, who never took the exam. A hurricane hits, demand explodes. He wants to pull permits fast. He pays a local qualifier cash to use the license. No contract. A job goes sideways, homeowner complains, inspection fails. DBPR investigates and finds the qualifier never visited the site. The qualifier's license gets disciplined. The roofer goes underground. Homeowner has little recourse because the business has few assets. That's the human cost.
Oof, and that's the old model. Now we see intermediary platforms trying to change the optics. Florida Contractor Qualifier is a good example. Danielle, what do these firms actually do differently?
They platformize it. Instead of ad hoc, cash under-the-table deals, they match vetted qualifiers with companies, put standard engagement agreements in place, help with DBPR paperwork, and emphasize compliance-first messaging. Key differences: they run background checks, prioritize qualifiers who sponsor only one company where possible, create a document trail, and provide predictable timelines, matching in 24-48 hours, DBPR processing typically 4 to 6 weeks. They market that as reducing risk for both sides.
So they formalize it. But this is the investigative part. Are they fixing the problem or just packaging the loophole? In other words, is this real supervision or just better paperwork?
It's both. They definitely reduce some risks: cleaner paperwork, better vetting, clearer expectations. But packaging alone doesn't guarantee day-to-day oversight. A qualifier can still be listed and be minimally involved. The difference is that intermediaries at least create a paper trail that shows intent to comply, which helps in audits or investigations. Whether that intent corresponds to substantive supervision depends on contract terms and how the parties behave.
Let me press on that. If I run a small company thinking I'll buy a qualified relationship to pull permits fast, what should I demand from a placement firm and from the qualifier to lower legal risk?
Great question. First, insist on a detailed engagement agreement that specifies scope: who does what decisions the qualifier has authority over, expectations around site visits, and how communications with building officials will be handled. Second, require proof of the qualifier's DBPR standing and ask for indemnity and insurance clauses. Make sure the company carries its own commercial general liability, workers' comp, and that the qualifier's placement doesn't relieve the company of responsibility. Third, include an audit clause: periodic check-ins or right to review records proving the qualifier's involvement. Fourth, termination and notice provisions. If DBPR asks awkward questions, there needs to be a clear process.
Details, yes. Can you give examples of language or metrics? Like how often should a qualifier do site visits or be involved in inspections?
Metrics are tricky because projects vary, but practical protections include: qualifier must attend critical inspections, foundation, structural, final, or at least be present for design review calls on projects over a certain dollar threshold. Insert a clause requiring documented monthly review of project logs or a signed compliance checklist for every permit. If a qualifier is sponsoring multiple companies, cap the number of active permits per qualifier. Say no more than X active jobs per region, clearly spelled out. Those things aren't perfect, but they create measurable expectations.
Right. Now, cost and timeline realities. Listeners want to know ballpark numbers. What should companies expect to pay for placement services, and how fast does this actually move?
Placement firms often charge a one-time placement fee plus a retainer or monthly fee that flows to the qualifier. Public anecdotes put qualifier monthly retention between $1,000 and $3,000 depending on trade and region. Placement fees to the intermediary vary. Some firms bundle paperwork and charge $500 to $2,000 for application support. Timeline: match in 24 to 72 hours often, but DBPR processing is the limiting factor. Expect 4 to 6 weeks for approvals if paperwork is clean, longer if there are financial responsibility issues.
Listeners are hearing two competing models: hire your own qualifier and build an in-house presence, or use a placement service. How do you advise executives deciding between those?
It's a strategic choice. If you have long-term plans in Florida, multiple projects, desire for brand control, invest in hiring or developing your own qualifier through sponsorship, training, and eventual license transfer. That aligns incentives and reduces counterparty risk. If you're testing a market, need speed for a single project, or have a short-term regional push, a well-documented placement through a reputable intermediary can be a pragmatic bridge. But do your diligence. Do not use it as a permanent workaround without strengthening internal controls.
Duly noted. Let's talk enforcement risk. Are regulators evolving? Is DBPR likely to clamp down on multi-company qualifying or intermediaries?
There's growing awareness. Possible moves include stricter limits on qualifiers sponsoring multiple companies, mandatory disclosures about intermediary involvement, and targeted audits. On the other hand, regulators are resource constrained. Intermediaries that are transparent and keep clean records could become allies. There's even potential for data sharing arrangements to make audits easier. But regulators could also adopt rules that make scaling harder for placement platforms, like thresholds that trigger board scrutiny.
So both policy risk and business risk. Quick hypothetical. Could an intermediary ever face liability if the qualifier they place is later disciplined?
Potentially, yes. If the intermediary misrepresented a qualifier's standing or failed to vet them, they could face reputational and legal exposure, especially if they marketed compliance assurances. That's why many intermediaries have disclaimers, "We're not a law firm," and they hammer home vetting processes. But that's not bulletproof. Bad placements and aggressive growth targets can create conflicts of interest.
Conflict of interest. Got it. For our executive listeners, give me a practical checklist. 5 immediate steps to take if you're considering using a qualifier placement service.
1. Verify the qualifier's DBPR status and disciplinary history yourself. Don't just take a screenshot from the placement site. 2. Require a written engagement agreement with defined scope, site visit expectations, and audit rights. 3. Confirm insurance and indemnity. Your company must carry sufficient policies, and the qualifier shouldn't be the only layer of protection. 4. Limit exposure. Cap a number of active projects the qualifier will cover and include performance covenants. 5. Plan for transition. If you intend to operate long-term, build a pathway to hire or sponsor your own qualifier and document training and knowledge transfer.
Excellent. Danielle, last big picture question. Is this market a stepping stone to healthier compliance or a long-term gray area Florida will wrestle with?
It can be both. If intermediaries act as compliance partners, helping firms become real, licensed participants, educating qualifiers and companies, and creating auditable records, they can be a net positive. If they simply scale the practice of name-on-paper relationships, they institutionalize a loophole. The difference comes down to incentives. If the intermediary's business model rewards clean placements and long-term client success, they'll push for substance over form. If scale and short-term revenue dominate, the gray market risks professionalizing.
That's a useful rubric. Follow the incentives. Danielle, thank you. This has been a clear, pragmatic look at a complicated issue. Any final words for construction owners listening right now?
Do your homework. This is legal risk, not just operational convenience. Understand Chapter 489, vet everyone, and treat qualifier placement as a strategic decision, not a shortcut. And, Michael, if you're relying on a placement for critical projects, bring legal counsel in early.
Good advice. That's the episode. If you want resources, check the description. I'm Michael Ortega. Danielle Reese, thank you again. Stay compliant and build smart.
Thanks, Michael. Take care.